Hello and welcome to Go For It. I am your host, Paul Gannon. For the next hour, we're going to be talking sports and having fun doing it with all your ideas, all your opinions, all your beliefs. And of course, as always, you will get a heavy dose of my opinion. So we got a lot to talk about today, a lot to get to, a lot to discuss. There's a lot going on in the world of sports. As always, NFL season, hot and heavy, NBA draft coming up. You got trade rumors out there, Westbrook, James Harden. So you got a lot of things going on around the National Football League, a lot of things going on around the NBA. So there's a lot to talk about. Sport of boxing, Terence Crawford, Kell Brook tomorrow night out there in the Las Vegas bubble, out there on ESPN. So a lot to get to here. So let's get right down to it. Let's get to it. So there's been a growing discussion around the National Football League in terms of Nick Foles and Carson Wentz. We heard Brett Favre, the great Brett Favre, Hall of Famer Brett Favre, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. He said that if he were the Philadelphia Eagles, he would have kept Nick Foles over Carson Wentz. And yes, Nick Foles did some things for the Eagles, ultimately got the Eagles a Super Bowl title. And when I heard Brett Favre say that, it's not unreasonable. It's not ridiculous. And in fact, it's a decent thought. Because if you look at it from the standpoint of, okay, Nick Foles just won you a Super Bowl. Nick Foles has played good football in that 2017 season in those playoffs. I mean, Nick Foles is absolutely incredible in those playoffs. The things that he did in those playoffs, there's not many quarterbacks could have done it. The way he played against the Vikings when he put up all those yards. Not many put the and I'm sure he would have been able to. I look at that and I say to myself, and looking at that, yes, you can make a strong argument for Nick Foles. 2017, he gets the team to the Super Bowl, wins the Super Bowl. 2018, Carson Wentz goes down with a bad back. Nick Foles gets the Eagles to the playoffs. At that point, it didn't seem like the playoffs were a possibility. They were struggling. Wentz was struggling. But Nick Foles came off the bench, reeled off a few victories, and got the Eagles to the playoffs. So 2017, he saved the day. 2018, he saved the day. He saved the day, period, point blank. So it is a legitimate argument for those who say the Eagles should have kept Nick Foles over Carson Wentz. Maybe you say if you're the Eagles, you know what, let's trade Carson Wentz. There'll be a huge trade market for Carson Wentz. Many people will want to take on Carson Wentz because he's coming off that 2017 season where he put up those big-time numbers and was the MVP of the league before he ripped up his knee against the Rams. So it's not a crazy thing because if you trade Carson Wentz at that time to a team, somebody's going to offer you a lot. They're going to offer you a lot to get their hands on Carson Wentz. So it's not a crazy thought by Brett Favre. But here's what I will say. If you look at Nick Foles' career, you could talk about Carson Wentz and his inability to stay healthy. Nick Foles has a hard time staying healthy and had a hard time staying healthy throughout the course of his career. Nick Foles has not been the pillar of health. He hasn't. If you remember, Nick Foles came off the bench in 2013, put up that huge season, 27-2. But that next season, he came back as a starter and only played 8 games. He only played 8 games because he got hurt. So Nick Foles has had a hard time staying healthy. You look at Nick Foles with St. Louis. He goes to St. Louis. He's hot garbage. Ultimately goes to Kansas City, resurrects his career as a backup under Andy Reid and comes to Philly, and the rest is history. But last season, Nick Foles, again, got hurt. First game of the season against the Kansas City Chiefs, while Nick Foles was with the Jaguars, he gets hurt. And again, out for a considerable amount of time. He comes back, doesn't play that well, and ultimately he loses his job to Gardner Minshew. So Nick Foles has had a lot of struggles in his career. And if you just watched it, and watch Nick Foles this year. I mean, Carson Wentz has had his struggles with interceptions and turnovers. But if you watch Nick Foles, it ain't much better. It's just not. Carson Wentz is the much more talented quarterback and a much more talented player, and it's not close. And it does appear that Nick Foles does have success in the Eagles system. He does. He has. It's true. But if we're talking talent for talent, who would you rather have? And I think it's a no-brainer. It's Carson Wentz. The guy, even though he's struggling with interception, is a stud. I still think Carson Wentz is a stud. And other than this year, the previous 3 seasons, Carson Wentz has had 7 interceptions apiece in those seasons. This season, he has 12. It's an outlier. It's not the usual thing when it comes to Carson Wentz. It's just not. It's not. So for those who are out here saying, oh, I'd rather have Nick Foles than Carson Wentz, you're silly. 50 shades of silly. You're ridiculous to think that. Again, I say you're ridiculous. I say it's silly, but it's not crazy. It's not super crazy because, again, Nick Foles did win a Super Bowl for you. Carson Wentz has not done that. Nick Foles did win playoff games for you. Carson Wentz has not done that. But if we're talking just pure talent and who would you rather have, it's got to be Carson Wentz. It's got to be Carson Wentz. And I don't think it's close. And I think if the Eagles were to make that move at the time after the 2017 season, if they were to make that move, they would have looked back on it with a level of regret. Because ultimately, eventually, Nick Foles would have got hurt. It always happens. The guy's never played a full season. Nick Foles, here's the thing about Nick Foles. This guy is so streaky. He's a streaky player. So there's moments where Nick Foles will go on a great run and play some great football. We saw it with that 27-2 season, his first year as a starter. We saw that. 27-2. We saw that season. He was streaky. He was hot. We saw it in the playoffs, during the playoffs when he got to the Super Bowl. He was streaky. He got hot. So when Nick Foles gets streaky, gets hot, gets a rhythm, he's tough. He's tough. He's big time. But when Nick Foles stinks up the joint, when the streak goes the other way, it's bad. It's bad. It's not pretty. It's downright ugly. So the point I'm trying to make is this. At the end of the day, Carson Wentz is the better player, is the better quarterback. And so for anybody at the time, it would have been a massive mistake for the Eagles to trade away Carson Wentz and keep Nick Foles. It would have been a mistake. It would have been a mistake, and there would have been some remorse from the Philadelphia Eagles, Howie Roseman, Doug Peterson, and the rest of the organization. Ultimately, they made the right decision. Ultimately, they stuck with Carson Wentz. And ultimately, Wentz did get them to the playoffs last year, even though he got hurt against the Seahawks and didn't last very long in the game. So he still hasn't won a playoff game and still hasn't played very much in the playoffs. But they don't get to the playoffs without Carson Wentz and what he did. He carried that team last season. And this year, injuries have played a part, in terms of his wide receivers. He's had issues there. In terms of his offensive line, he's had issues there. But don't get me wrong. Carson Wentz has made some boneheaded decisions and made some boneheaded passes this season. There's no doubt about it. There's no getting past that part. It's true. But, the guy is a very talented quarterback. And I'm still on that Wentz wagon. I haven't gotten off. I ain't getting off. Well, maybe I'll get off at some point if it gets bad. But I think ultimately, say what you will about Carson Wentz. Say what you will about the NFC East. I mean, at the end of the day, he's probably going to lead his team to a division victory, a division title. And then, what are we going to say after that? This team will get a division title. It's that simple. They're the best team in this division. Barring anything crazy or ridiculous or out of the realm of possibility, anything can happen. But barring anything crazy or ridiculous, the Eagles will win the NFC East. But I will say this. New York Giants this week, that's going to be an interesting game. That game scares me a little bit. Because the Giants, as bad as they are, have played some decent football. They just had a hard time closing out games. They've had a hard time closing out football games throughout the course of this season. Maybe they fix it this week against the Eagles. They did beat not the Redskins. I wanted to say the Redskins. They did beat the Washington football team 2 times in close games. That's the only 2 victories against the Washington football team. So, again, the Giants their record indicates and shows that they stink. It may say that they stink, but they're not that bad. They play teams close. They do. They compete. They're in football games. They easily could have beat Tampa Bay a few weeks ago. They probably should have beat the Eagles in their first matchup. I mean, Evan Ingram had a pass that just went off his fingertips. That would have been a first down, and they probably would have put the game away. So, and who came back and won that game for the Eagles? Carson Wentz. So, there you have it. But at the end of the day, look, Eagles made the right choice, made the right decision. Now, Wentz has to turn this thing around, stop it with the mistakes, stop it with the turnovers, stop it with the silly stuff. And I know he's a gunslinger. He's going to go for it. I mean, Brett Favre, he went for it. The guy had multiple years of 20-plus interceptions. Eli Manning went for it. Guy had multiple years of 20 interceptions. These guys are risk takers. They take chances. So when you take a lot of chances, there are going to be some times where the chances don't work out in your favor. And that's the bottom line. At times, it has not worked out in the favor of Carson Wentz. So let's just clear this up. I'm going with Wentz. Brett Favre, you're wrong. The Eagles made the right choice. So there was another thing out there. Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson. That was Ryan Clark of ESPN. He came out and said he would rather have, he said that Baltimore would be in a better place if they had Kyler Murray. And basically he's saying he would rather have Kyler Murray over Lamar Jackson. And that's another interesting one. Because I look at Lamar Jackson, and obviously last season was ridiculous. 36 passing touchdowns, only 6 interceptions, 1,200 yards rushing for Lamar Jackson. So the numbers were eye-popping. He was the MVP. The numbers were ridiculous. But what happened once we got to the playoffs? Once we got to the playoffs, Lamar Jackson struggled a little bit. The Ravens were fighting from behind, and it forced Lamar Jackson into obvious passing situations. He had some turnovers in that game, didn't play that well, and ultimately the Ravens would lose. Now, I'll answer that question this way when it comes to Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson. I'll answer it this way. If you're down 20, right, if the score is 20-0, who would you rather have? Would you rather have Kyler Murray or would you rather have Lamar Jackson? I would rather have Kyler Murray because Kyler Murray is the pure passer. Kyler Murray is the pure passer, is the better passer. So if you ask me that question, who would I rather have down 20-0? I'd rather have Kyler Murray. Now, who would I rather have up 20-0? Rather have Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, I mean, I'd rather have him in those situations. But if I'm down 20-0 and I'm in obvious passing situations, I'm going with Lamar Murray. I mean, not Lamar Murray. I'm going with Kyler Murray. I'm going with Murray. If I'm in that situation, if I'm in a situation when I have to obviously pass the football, everybody knows I'm passing the football, I'm down 20 points, I'm going with Murray. Now, if you look at overall, I mean, Kyler Murray is having an MVP caliber season. He's doing it with his legs, over 500 yards rushing at this point. He's doing it with his arm. I mean, he's playing some big-time football. Lamar Jackson at this point has been a little bit of a struggle at times. The numbers aren't awful. 12 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. The numbers aren't awful, but it has been a struggle for Lamar Jackson this year. Has been a struggle at times. Now, that offense hasn't played that well either in Baltimore as a whole. But I think I just have to look at this argument, look at this debate from this standpoint, down 20, who would you rather have? Kyler or Lamar? Murray or Jackson? Who would you rather have? And I think the answer is very simple. I'm going with Murray. I'm going with Murray in that particular situation. And overall, would the Ravens be better off with Kyler Murray over Lamar Jackson at this point in time? That's a good question. That's a very good question. And you know what? I think Ryan Clark is right there. I think the Ravens would be better off. Let me ask you this. as great as Lamar Jackson has been last season, and this year the numbers aren't bad, but he hasn't been great. But as great as he was last season, did you really truly trust him? Did you really trust that system, the system that relies on his legs a lot often? That system it's more, and I know the college and the NFL game are blending a little bit. The offenses are a lot more similar than they used to be. But again, Kyler Murray is the running, obviously Lamar Jackson, but Kyler's not too far behind. But the passing, it's Murray. It's Murray. So again, if I had to choose and if I was down 20, I'm going with Kyler Murray. And yes, the Ravens probably would be better off with Murray over Jackson. But here's the thing. I say this about Lamar Jackson. The questions about Lamar Jackson won't be answered until the playoffs. That's when we can fully and truly answer all the questions about Lamar Jackson. Is what happens in the playoffs. We've seen him have a great regular season. We've seen him put up numbers. We've seen him do some amazing, eye-popping, crazy highlight reel type stuff. We've seen it. But we haven't seen him have success in the playoffs, whether it's his rookie season against the Chargers or whether it's his second season against the Titans. And both of those situations were home football games for the Baltimore Ravens, and Lamar Jackson came up small. And it's not all on him because Derrick Henry did have he had 195 yards rushing in that game. So when you let a team get over 200 yards rushing, it's very difficult to win. Let's be clear about that. Let's be clear about that. Let's be absolutely clear about that. It's hard to win when you let a team rush for over 200 yards, period, point blank. It's hard. But, and it could have been a situation even with that Raven team last season coming into that game. It could have been a situation where they may have been rusty. Could have been a level of rust, and we've seen that where teams that have the bye sometimes come back rusty. And then in football, it's not like basketball, it's not like baseball, it's not like hockey. It's a one-game situation. So if you have an off game, if you have an off night, you could be done. It's that simple. Off game, off night, and the season could be over for you. And that's what's happened with Lamar Jackson the past 2 seasons. Off game, off night in the playoffs, and the season was over for his team. Now, I thought last year Baltimore had a great chance to get to the Super Bowl. I really did. Now, I will say this. I thought the Chiefs were the better football team, and I thought if the Ravens and the Chiefs were to play in the playoffs, that the Chiefs would win. But I will say this. I didn't expect them to lose in the divisional round. I didn't expect that to happen. That was something I did not expect to happen. I thought at least the Ravens would get to the AFC Championship game. I didn't expect them to lose in the divisional round. I didn't expect that. It happened, but I didn't expect it. Would that have happened with Kyler Murray as the quarterback? Would that have happened if, Titans were up earlier in that game and up throughout the whole game? If Kyler Murray was there, a guy who's who's a better passer than Lamar Jackson, could Murray have made the difference in that game? Maybe, possibly. Who knows? But again, if I had to choose, and let's be clear, Kyler Murray was the number 1 pick for a reason. There's a reason that Kyler Murray was the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. He's that good. So there's a reason. It's not like this dude was a 5th rounder, 6th rounder, 4th rounder. This dude was the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. So there's a reason why he was that. And there's a reason why he's playing the way he's playing, because he's a very good quarterback at this point. He's got some weapons around him, too. DeAndre Hopkins is a weapon. Maybe one of the best wide receivers in football. That's a weapon. Fitzgerald is still a weapon. Still a weapon. So they got weapons out there in Arizona, and Kyler Murray is slinging that rock, and Kyler Murray is using his feet, and Kyler Murray has been awful effective for the Cardinals this season. And again, I'll leave this debate here. I'll leave it here. At the end of the day, I'll leave it here. Down 20. Who would you rather have? Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray? And if you, to me, the answer of that question, if you answer that question and you say Murray, then Murray is your guy. You'd rather have him. If you say Jackson, then Jackson is your guy and you'd rather have Jackson. For me, in my house, I'm going with Kyler Murray. And that's just the bottom line. That's just the way I feel. Someone said Deshaun Watson. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, Deshaun Watson's up there for sure. For sure. Murray, Watson, or Jackson, who would you rather have? That's a good one. That's a good one. I got to think about that. That's a good one. I'll put it this way. To me, it would come down to Murray or Watson. It would come down to Murray or Watson. Because as great as Lamar Jackson is, the numbers that he put up are great. The things that he's done is great. Like I said, all the highlight reel stuff and everything, all that stuff is great. But can you win football games when it matters? And when it matters is playoff time. That's when it matters. When it comes to the playoffs, that's what matters. We've seen Deshaun Watson have success in the playoffs. We haven't seen that out of Jackson. I know Watson's been around longer, but we haven't seen that out of Jackson. And again, we'll probably see it this year in terms of him going to the playoffs. But what happens in the playoffs, that's a whole nother story. But here, even in this type of year, when we talk about the NFL this season, we talk about sports in general in 2020. It's wild. And it's one of those things where, I'm not putting asterisks around things, but it's one of those things, sports in 2020, there's a lot of variables. And the biggest variable is COVID-19. And I said this last week, and I've said this numerous times. This season, 2020, could come down to which team doesn't have COVID. What player doesn't have COVID or what player does have COVID? It could come down to a situation. God forbid Tom Brady gets COVID and the Buccaneers have to go in with their backup. Totally different game. Patrick Mahomes, God forbid, gets COVID and the Chiefs got to go into a playoff game with a backup. Drew Brees, God forbid, gets COVID and the Saints got to go into the playoffs with a backup. So you look at all those things and those things change. That changes the whole thing. That changes the whole game. Changes the whole game. So COVID is a big-time ultimate game changer in sports in 2020. So how the season ends, who wins the Super Bowl could come down to who is COVID-free. It's that simple. And COVID is spreading around the country, throughout the country. People are getting the virus. They're getting the virus. So it's a tough situation right now. And we saw the outbreak earlier in the Tennessee practice facility with the Titans. If something like that were to happen, we're in flu season at this point. And if something like that were to happen, it's the ultimate game changer. It can change this. I'll even look at it in terms of what happened this season. Earlier, Cam Newton, the first two games was playing some decent football, playing some very good football. He gets COVID. He misses the Chiefs game. He comes back and struggles. And ultimately, he comes back. They lose a few games. He's struggling, not playing good football. Played pretty well against the Jets on Monday night. But again, COVID impacted that game against the Chiefs. And if you remember that game, New England's defense played pretty well in that game. They were solid in that football game. And they gave New England an opportunity to win. But Brian Hoyer and Jarrett Stidham just couldn't get it done. Maybe Cam Newton could have got it done for the Patriots on that particular night. The Chiefs were there for the taking in that game, if you remember. It was a close game throughout. But New England just couldn't get anything from their offense. Cam Newton was rolling at that time, if you remember. He was rolling. I believe he was coming off that big-time game against the Seahawks where he put up a bunch of numbers, over 300 yards, had a big-time game. And, again, if you put him there while he's rolling against the Kansas City Chiefs in a game that's winnable, anything could happen. So I go back to that, and I say COVID is the thing that could change what happens in the world of sports and what happens in this NFL season, what happens in this upcoming NBA season, what happens in college football. I mean, look at Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence gets COVID and Clemson loses to Notre Dame. Now, it's not all on, I mean, that may not be the reason they lost, not having Trevor Lawrence, but obviously having Trevor Lawrence would help. But at the same time, you did give up 40-plus points if you're the Clemson defense. So, I mean, and Notre Dame's a good football team. So but Trevor Lawrence is Trevor Lawrence. So it would have made a difference. I don't know. I mean, the game went into overtime. It was a close game. So who knows what would have happened if Trevor Lawrence was there. But it impacted the college football season. So it's all going to, as crazy as it sounds, it could come down to which team has less cases, less COVID cases. I mean, it's that simple. And that's crazy. 2020 has been a crazy year. The people who've died, I mean, Kobe Bryant checked out in 2020. I mean, that to me was just like, that was a big blow. That was in January, he checked out in 2020, early in 2020. And then as the months went on, crazier things have happened. COVID is spreading everywhere. And again, people are dying from COVID. We got this presidential election, which is wild. I mean, at this point, Donald Trump hasn't conceded. So all these things are going on in 2020. It's been a wild year. And so we still got we still got half of November to go through. We still got all of December to go through. So 2020 could still do some crazy things. It's done some crazy things to this point, and maybe it can do some crazier things as we go on. I want to switch gears. I want to go to the NBA now. And the NBA draft this week, and you're hearing a lot of rumors swirling around the NBA. Who could go here? Who can go there? I mean, it's great. Obviously, it's always fun. NBA season is expected to start December 22nd, and they're going to get started then. They're trying to get done sometime in July, right before the Olympics, so they could, the players can participate in the Olympics. Obviously, you have some guys from overseas who obviously enjoy the Olympics and want to play in the Olympics, and obviously the Americans. A lot of American NBA players who want to be in the Olympics as well and have that experience, have that opportunity to win a gold medal. But you look at the NBA and just the people we're talking. Westbrook apparently wants out. Russell Westbrook apparently wants out of Houston. He wants to move on. He wants to go to another situation. Now, I look at the situation with Westbrook, and don't get me wrong. Let's be clear about something. I love Russell Westbrook. Let me repeat myself. I love Russell Westbrook. And I look at Westbrook, and I look at that triple-double season. And that triple-double season was absolutely amazing. Never in my wildest dreams did I think a player could average a triple-double. Oscar Robertson did it twice, but I didn't think anybody else could do it. No one, we've seen, we talk about if there's any guy that was going to do it, it was going to be LeBron. But Russell Westbrook did it not only once, but he did it twice. He did it 2 times. I mean, that's amazing. That's not easy. So Westbrook, when Durant left and went on to Golden State, I rooted hard for Russell Westbrook. I really did. I rooted hard for this guy. But here's the thing with Westbrook. And as great as he is, and the numbers that he put up last year were good. I mean, he put up some good numbers last year, averaged 27 points a game. I mean, he put up big-time numbers last year, Westbrook. But I'm looking at Westbrook, and I'm saying, if you're a contending team, do you want that? Do you want a guy who, he's a big personality, he's a big player. He's a ball-dominant player. Likes to have the ball in his hand. Do you want that? And to me, if I'm a contender, I'm leery of it. I am. And I also think Westbrook, as great as he was and is, he's a declining asset. He's a guy who's had difficult time staying healthy. He's a guy, again, a volume shooter, a ball-dominant player, maybe even a ball stopper. Once he gets that ball in his hands, the ball stops, and it ends with a Westbrook shot. Now, it's still a guy that can put up numbers. Still a guy that can do some things. but is he a winning player at this point? I do believe this. If you look back at the year, the Warriors 73 win season, right? And ultimately, if you look back at that season, OKC had the Warriors right where they wanted them. OKC had the Warriors down 3-1. It was Durant and Westbrook together. And those two were flying high, playing some big-time basketball. Them two together. I do believe, and ultimately you look at it, Westbrook, Harden, and Durant, they did get to the NBA Finals in 2012. They would lose to the Miami Heat. I do believe if Durant would have stayed in OKC with Westbrook, I do think that combination could have got at least one. I think they could have got one title. So I'm not one of these guys that said you can't win with Russell Westbrook. I'm not, because I think you can. But at the same time, if I'm a contender, I'm leery. I am. I'm leery. Does he fit? I mean, we saw ultimately when OKC, when Durant left, and then that 1 year, the couple years where Westbrook got those triple doubles, and then they get Paul George in there. They get Paul George, and it's not all on Westbrook, but ultimately Paul George and Westbrook couldn't deliver. Now you can talk about Paul George, playoff P, if you will. You can talk about Paul George, and he didn't deliver this year. Now, it's only 1 year. It's only one season. So, and you look at the Clippers, they still have to gel a little bit. But playoff P did not get it done. Didn't get it done last year. He didn't. Just did not get it done. So, I don't know. I don't know when it comes to Westbrook. Here's what I will say. A team like the Charlotte Hornets, who have been rumored to have interest, Michael Jordan, Westbrook have a relationship. Westbrook is with Jumpman and all that. So it kind of makes sense. And the Charlotte Hornets are struggling to create a buzz. They are struggling to create a buzz on some level. So a guy like Westbrook, yes, he still has 3 years left at $132 million. But a guy like Westbrook brings interest to the Charlotte Hornets. Might even give him some wins. Probably helps him get to the playoffs. But anything more than that in terms of a champion, obviously the Hornets don't become championship contenders if Westbrook joins the fold. No, it doesn't happen that way. But again, it brings buzz to that situation. So that would be an ideal situation if you're Russell Westbrook and if you're Michael Jordan and you're trying to create a buzz for your franchise. That would be ideal. Westbrook to Charlotte. That would be ideal. Now, again, obviously you'd have to make all that work in terms of salaries and things of that nature. But it would be interesting to see, and Michael Jordan has been notoriously cheap. So, we'll see how that will work. But that's an interesting destination. A team like the Detroit Pistons, another team looking to try to create a buzz. And, they had a hard time trying to create a buzz in Detroit. Ever since that team with Billups and Hamilton and Tayshaun Prince and Rasheed Wallace, it's been a struggle creating a buzz in Detroit. They tried it with Blake Griffin, but Blake Griffin has had a hard time staying healthy. Just that simple when it comes to Blake. But a guy like Westbrook brings buzz, instant buzz, to Detroit. It brings a buzz. I just think, do you want to pay 3 years, $132 million for Russell Westbrook at this point of his career? A guy that I think he's still playing good basketball. Don't get me wrong. But I think it's a declining asset. It's a declining asset. Do you want a declining asset and all that money you have to pay him? Do you want that? That's the question you have to ask yourself. Is it worth it? That's the question you have to ask yourself. And those are the questions that GMs, coaches, owners around the league are going to have to ask themselves when it comes to acquiring Russell Westbrook. Again, maybe the Knicks, we always talk about the Knicks in those situations. I mean, this would be a New York Knicks move, a perfect New York Knicks move. Westbrook in New York City, that'd be fun. It'd be fun. I'm not saying it would be profitable. I mean, I'm saying it's going to lead to a bunch of victories, but it could get you to the playoffs. It could. I'm not saying it's going to get you a championship, but it could get you to the playoffs for sure. But that would be fun, Westbrook to New York. Would be fun. But we'll see what happens with Russ, and we'll see how this whole situation plays out. It does appear, though, that Westbrook wants out of Houston, and where he lands, that should be interesting. At this point, in my opinion, I don't see a contending team taking that chance on Westbrook. I see more of a team that a non-playoff team taking their chance or wanting to go after a Westbrook. We'll see how that whole situation plays out. But Westbrook's mate, his guy, James Harden, reportedly, may want out as well. And where he lands is going to be interesting. He's reportedly questioning management, questioning the situation in Houston. So where he goes should be interesting. A lot of people have been pointing to the Philadelphia 76ers. Obviously, Daryl Morey is the president of basketball operations in Philadelphia. Daryl Morey has a great relationship with James Harden. James Harden has had his most success with Daryl Morey in Houston. So the logical thing would be Harden to Philadelphia. And when I look at that, it's not a bad move. And when I also look at it, the logical guy would probably be Ben Simmons. Because if you're the Philadelphia 76ers, you want to be able to have the opportunity to team up Harden with Joel Embiid. Or you could say, I think Houston, if you're Houston, you'd rather have Simmons over Embiid for this simple fact. I know Ben Simmons has, had some injury issues this season, but the guy has pretty much been the pillar of health when it comes to Ben Simmons. His first year, he had the foot situation, first year in the league, and he missed that season. But that also could have been a byproduct of the Sixers, continue on their tanking ways. But at the same time, when I look at the Sixers and I look at Ben Simmons, and the fit between Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid is funky. It's a funky fit. It doesn't fit the way you want teammates to fit. It's just not a perfect fit. James Harden and Joel Embiid is a much perfect fit. James Harden and Joel Embiid is an interesting fit. Maybe one of the best centers in the game with maybe one of the best scorers in the game. So you put those two guys together. Doc Rivers is out there in Philadelphia. Morey is there in Philadelphia. It makes sense. It does make sense. There would be a level of reluctance to part with Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons obviously doesn't shoot. We know that's the knock on Ben Simmons. He does not shoot the basketball. He does not shoot the basketball. Whether he feels like he can't do it, whether he just doesn't shoot. There's no confidence, obviously based on the way he plays, in his ability to make a jump shot. That's clear. So if you look at Simmons, he does so many other great things great. He's a great distributor. He's a great defender. He's a do-it-all type of guy. And here's the thing. Ben Simmons did average 16 points, is a stat sheet stuffer. So he's the type of guy that even if he doesn't ever improve his game, he can make the All-Star game, the All-Star team, year in and year out, and end up as a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done. It's that simple. The things that he does great, he does great. But the terms of the shooting, and a guy, and I made this point before, and I'll make this point again. When you watch Ben Simmons, you watch him in the playoffs, right? The first year he's in the playoffs, they go through, they beat Miami. Ben Simmons looks great. Then in his second round against the Boston Celtics, the competition stiffens a little bit. The Boston Celtics are a better basketball team than the Miami Heat, and Ben Simmons can't do the things that he did against the Miami Heat in that first round, in that first year in the playoffs for him. He couldn't do the same type of things. He couldn't. And there was a game, he had 1 point? He had 1 point in one of those games. So it's been a struggle with Ben Simmons. And then look at the next year. So first year, Miami, he plays well, does great. And then the second round, Boston, he struggles. Next year, he plays the Brooklyn Nets, plays well, does his thing, puts some big time numbers. Second round, they play the Toronto Raptors. He's stuck in the corner because there's not much he can do on the offensive end. So the point I'm trying to make is Ben Simmons, especially after you decided to part ways with Jimmy Butler, whether Jimmy Butler wanted to stay, who knows, or whether the Sixers weren't willing to give him the money that he wanted, who knows? Who knows what it is in terms of that? But the moment you gave up Jimmy Butler, Ben Simmons had to elevate his game, and he didn't do it. He was the same old 16, 7, and 7, and things of that nature, big-time defender, but he didn't elevate on the offensive end. And ultimately, he did get hurt a few times as well last season. But at the same time, and again, he was the pillar of health before that. But at the same time, when you're a guy that does, everything to the cup, everything to the basket when it comes to Ben Simmons, everything has to be to the basket because his jump shot, he doesn't have the confidence in it. And when he does take it, it's really not that great, obviously, and he's not making them, but he doesn't take enough to give him to judge it, really. He doesn't take enough. He doesn't take enough jump shots. But that part of his game has to get better. His jump shot is a funky-looking jump shot. It's not your standard jump shot. It's funky. And that has to get better. And when you have a guy that's struggling to shoot or won't shoot, well, it affects the offense. Slows things down. When you're not moving fast, when you're not going up and down the court, which Ben Simmons likes to do, when you're not moving up and down the court and doing the things that you like to do and making the big-time passes and doing things in transition, when things slow up and they slow up in the playoffs and the competition stiffens, it becomes a little bit more difficult for Ben Simmons. Obviously, if you're Philadelphia, to me, if you're the Philadelphia, and this is tough. This is tough because Ben Simmons does a lot of things great. He does. He really does. He's an all-star for a reason. But if you have an opportunity, because here's the thing with Joel Embiid, you don't know how long you're going to have him around healthy. You don't know. You don't. Because we've seen with Joel Embiid, he had a lot of injury issues earlier in his career. And, he's had struggles at times staying healthy. So you don't know how long you got with that big man. There's not a lot of guarantees when it comes to Joel Embiid. So if you're the Philadelphia 76ers, and at this point, this team is in win now mode. The process has been over. This team is now, they have to win. They went for it last year and they struck out. Went out in the first round. Al Horford wasn't a fit. Tobias Harris had his moments but struggled in the playoffs. Obviously, losing Ben Simmons hurt as well. But the team that they put together wasn't a perfect fit. And you could say maybe the coach didn't do a good job of putting it together. You could make that argument. I wasn't in love with Brett Brown. I don't think he's a bad coach. But I think they needed another coach, another voice to take this situation to the next level. And I think Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid needed a new voice. But I do think that fit can work, Simmons and Embiid. You just need somebody else around them that can create. Maybe a Chris Paul. Chris Paul, obviously, there's rumors that he could go to Phoenix. But Chris Paul was a guy who had a big-time season for OKC last season, and a guy who can do some things off the dribble, and a guy who can create. He's a guy that would be interesting in Philadelphia, and I think would be a fit. But if you're the Sixers and you have an opportunity to get James Harden and to team James Harden up with Joel Embiid, I think you do it. And I think you part with Ben Simmons. I don't know what Ben Simmons is going to be. I don't know. I know what he is. An elite defender, an elite distributor, a guy that can get to the rack. He's good, very good. But I don't know if Ben Simmons can go beyond where he's at this point. I don't know. I can't say that with any level of sureness. I can't say. I can't. So I don't know if Ben, being that I'm not sure, and again, I'm not Daryl Morey, I'm not Doc Rivers, so what I think really doesn't matter. But this is what I think. I'm not sure about Ben Simmons. And I don't think, if you look at Ben Simmons, the question you have to ask yourself, has he grown his game? Has his game grown from the moment he stepped into the league till now? Has Ben Simmons' game grown? Has he gotten better? You could say slightly. But he's still kind of the same guy. And there hasn't been any improvement from him. And I don't know how higher he can go based on where he's at. And I always said this about Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons, I'm not saying he doesn't put the work in. I'm not saying that. Because the guy's in shape. I'm not saying he doesn't put the work in. But what I'm saying is sometimes guys are comfortable with being very good. And then some guys are uncomfortable being very good and want to be great. I'm not sure where Ben Simmons is. Is Ben Simmons one of those guys who's comfortable with being very good? I don't know. Or is he one of those guys uncomfortable being very good and wants to be great? I don't know. He still doesn't have a functional jump shot. The jump shot is still, I mean, we've seen him take a 3 or 2 this season and make them, but the jump shot is not functional. He doesn't need to be a sniper. He doesn't need to be Steph Curry. Doesn't need to be Klay Thompson. He just needs to have a functional jump shot. He needs to have a functional jump shot. And you're right, Jason Pettyway. You're right. Maybe new coaching will elevate Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid together. Maybe that's what they needed. They needed that new voice. Maybe they were a voice away from elevating the roster and elevating the team. Maybe that's it. I don't know. But I do know this. If I have an opportunity to get my hands on James Harden for Ben Simmons, guess what? I'm doing it. And if I'm the Rockets, I think that's a good move. He's a guy that, if you're going to get rid of Westbrook and you're going to get rid of Harden and you're bringing in a Ben Simmons, he's a guy that maybe you can build the team around. Build a roster around. We look at Giannis. We look at Giannis in Milwaukee. His jump shot isn't great. It's functional, but it isn't great. But that team was built around him. Maybe Ben Simmons could be that guy where, the lane is wide open. You don't have that big man down there clogging it, and you got a wide open lane. Maybe that is a situation for Ben Simmons in Houston where he has his own team where he would be that guy and be that dude and elevate his game. Maybe. But I will tell you this. I don't know. I don't trust it. I don't trust him. I don't trust that his jump shot. I mean, we've seen last summer. We saw those videos, right? You saw those open runs, Ben Simmons out there shooting threes and all that, and everybody's getting excited. I'm getting excited too, jumping around, right? I'm getting excited. I'm a Sixers fan. So I'm getting excited. I'm jumping around. I'm ecstatic. And then we go back on the court, and it's same old Ben. It's the same old Ben. Same old Ben not shooting. Same old Ben turning down jump shots. It's the same old Simmons. And then, so if I see video this year of Ben Simmons in the next couple of weeks, I know the NBA season starts December 22nd, so it's going to be quick. They're going to be in training camp soon and everything. But if I see a video of Ben Simmons shooting threes, I'm throwing it. If it's my phone, I'm throwing it. If it's on my computer, I'm throwing it. If it happens to get on my television, I'm throwing it because I won't believe it. I don't believe it. To me, that's just smoke and mirrors, right? That's some David Copperfield type stuff because I don't see it in the game. I see it in pickup. I mean, we can do a lot of different things to pick up. But when the lights are bright, that's what separates guys. You look at the sport of boxing, right? The sport of boxing, you have guys sparring, right? Some guys in sparring do their thing in sparring. But as soon as those lights turn on, as soon as those lights get bright, big stage, you in the main event, guess what? It changes. It changes, and it's not, right? It's not big time. You're not the same guy. You're used to sparring, and you get that sparrers mentality when those lights come on, and it doesn't work. It doesn't translate. Doesn't translate. So, I mean, it's maybe that's it with Ben Simmons. Maybe he's just gun shy. Maybe he's just scared. Maybe he needs to sit down with a sports psychologist and talk to him and Ben, why are you afraid to shoot the jump shot? I don't want to mess up. I'm scared. Ben, failure is a part of success. It's a part of growth. But I'm scared. I'm afraid. I mean, maybe that's what Ben needs. Maybe Ben needs to sit down with somebody. I don't know. I don't know. But it's a huge issue and it's a huge problem. Yes, you're right, Jason Pettyway, in terms of Jimmy Butler. He did make it known that coaching was a huge issue in Philadelphia. Coaching was a huge issue in Philadelphia. Brett Brown was a huge issue in Philadelphia. Brett Brown, to me, was a guy, again, who was a nice guy. Everybody loved him. Great guy, swell guy. But his ability to coach was questionable. His ability to make adjustments was questionable. Brad Stevens ate his lunch. Stole his lunch money in that first season where they went to the playoffs, where the Sixers went to the playoffs. And then last year, Brad Stevens did it again. Stole his lunch money, and you can argue Boston had the more talent at that point. But still, Brad Stevens outcoached him and stole his money, stole Brett Brown's lunch money. And there was nothing Brett Brown could do about it. Maybe there was some things he could do about it, just didn't know what to do. And that's why Brett Brown is gone and Doc Rivers is in the building. And here's the thing. I love the move bringing Doc Rivers to Philadelphia. I was in love with the move. I was happy with the move because Doc Rivers has won before. Doc Rivers is a guy who's good with people. People love Doc Rivers. So I love the move. Loved it. So if anybody is going to get into these guys' ear, Simmons and Embiid, it's going to be Glenn Doc Rivers. We'll see if he can do it. We'll see if he can do it. I put my money that he can do it, but I will say this, and I'll say it again, I'll repeat myself. If James Harden is available, if I have an opportunity to get James Harden for Ben Simmons, I'm making it. I'm taking my chance. I'm taking the plunge. I'm taking the plunge. I got to take the plunge. I'm doing it. No ifs, ands, buts about it. Because as great as Ben Simmons is in terms of the things that he does, in terms of the defense, in terms of the distribution, in terms of all those things, getting to the cup, all those things, at the end of the day, the guy has not grown his game, and there's no growth, and I'm afraid that there won't be any growth moving forward. So before we get out of here, we got to touch on, there's a big fight tomorrow. Terence Crawford, Kell Brook, out there in the MGM Grand bubble, Las Vegas. It's an interesting fight for a lot of reasons. Terence Crawford, big time undefeated, maybe the pound for pound best in the sport of boxing. Kell Brook is a guy who's solid. Kell Brook is solid. He's good. Yeah, I mean, Kell Brook is good. You know, he's a guy that came over here and beat Sean Porter, won the IBF belt. He fought Gennady Golovkin when Golovkin was in his prime, and, you know, he gave him fits in that fight for as long as it went, but ultimately he broke his eye bone, and then that was it, end of that. And then he fought Errol Spence. Errol Spence went over the pond, over to England, and got the belt from Brook. And another fight Brook was solid in that fight. I look at Kell Brook. This is his last chance, his last opportunity to win a title. This is it for him. 34 years old. So you're 34 years old. This is it for you. So he looks like he's in tremendous shape at the weigh-in. He looked like he was in tremendous shape. So he looked like he's ready to go. And I look at this fight, and this is an interesting fight. And Terence Crawford, you know, as great as Terence Crawford is, this guy at times, he gets hurt in fights. Whether it's Gamboa or whether it was Mean Machine in the last fight. I mean, Terence Crawford, that easily was a knockdown. That probably was a knockdown. It wasn't called a knockdown, but that was a knockdown against Mean Machine in that particular fight. It wasn't called a knockdown. So Terence Crawford, he is a guy that you can hurt. You can hurt Terence Crawford. And Kell Brook is a guy who, again, coming over here, last chance, last hurrah, last opportunity to get a belt, to get another belt, because this will be a second belt. This is his last chance to get another title. Those two guys and those opportunities, sometimes they come up big. He looks focused. He looks ready for this opportunity. Now, I'm not saying he beats Terence Crawford, and I'm not saying I want him to beat Terence Crawford. And I'll tell you why. I want Crawford to stay undefeated. And ultimately, eventually, as much as I love Danny Garcia, Philadelphia guy. I'm a guy from that area as well. I love Danny Garcia, and I think Danny Garcia could actually beat Errol Spence. But I would love to see Crawford and Spence, and I would love to see when both of those guys are undefeated. So part of me is rooting for Crawford, and then part of me is rooting for Spence. But at the same time, part of me is rooting for Danny Garcia as well. So yes, Crawford can be hit. Crawford can be hit. And Crawford, again, he got dropped against Mean Machine in his last fight. He got dropped. We'll see if Brook has enough. We'll see if Brook still has enough. He's 34 years old. Boxing is an unforgiving game. It's a young man's game. So Brook is on the other side of things. But like I said, he looks like he's in tremendous shape. It's going to be an interesting fight. It's going to be I think it's going to be a fun fight. For as long as it lasts, I think it's going to be a fun fight. And we also look at Terence Crawford. He wants to possibly wants to get out of that top-ranked deal. Reportedly, according to Mike Coppinger of The Athletic, Terence Crawford wants to get out of that deal. And apparently, Terence Crawford, his deal with Top Rank is up in October of 2021, reportedly. So, deal being up in October 20th, 21. So, there's a chance if that deal's up, he can go on, be done with Top Rank, go over to PBC where there's great fights at 147, maybe even 154 if Crawford decides to move up. But there are some great fights at 147 for Terence Crawford, whether it's Errol Spence, whether it's Keith Thurman, whether it's Danny Garcia. I mean, there are some great fights for Terence Crawford with PBC. He belongs with PBC. He belongs with Al Heyman. It's just it's perfect. They're perfect together. And just like I said last week with Tank Davis, Tank doesn't have a lot of options at 130 and 135 with PBC. But he sure would have a lot of options over there with Top Rank. Because they got guys. They got Teofimo Lopez at 135. They got Shakur Stevenson up at 130. Burchelt, Jamel Herring. They got guys at 130, 135 for Tank. But over on the PBC side, the only guy I see is Gary Russell Jr. that kind of stands out for me. So it's the opposite with Terence Crawford. He's over at Top Rank, and there's not many guys at 147. Maybe you can wait for Josh Taylor to move up to 147. Maybe you can wait for that. I don't know. But there's not many options. So, and if Crawford, and don't get me wrong, Crawford maybe could retire now and be a Hall of Famer. But at the end of the day, if he wants to make his mark, I think he has to go to PBC. And I'm not saying he hasn't made his mark, but if he wants to truly make his mark, if he wants to be great, and I'm not saying he's great, but if he wants to be greater, he's got to come on over to PBC. Fight a Errol Spence. Fight a Danny Garcia. Fight a Keith Thurman. All those, Sean Porter as well. All those options at 147 for Terence Crawford. He's got to go to PBC. I don't think there's any way to get around it. He must go to PBC. And does Al Heyman maybe Al Heyman in Top Rank, Bob Arum, they decide, you know what, let's make this fight the same way we did with Fury and Wilder. But if you're Al Heyman, why not wait till October 2021? When the contract expires, you go over, you say, you know what, Terence, come on over, and you keep the money in-house instead of having to share it with the ESPN. You put it on Fox pay-per-view. You put it on Showtime pay-per-view. One of the two. And those are the two outlets that PBC deals with, Fox and Showtime. So, to me, if you're Terence Crawford, you need to just continue to handle your business. handle your business against Kell Brook tomorrow. And whoever else is out there, handle your business. Stay undefeated. It's time to go to PPC, and it's time to get those fights. Time to get those fights. And they're great fights, obviously. And we know what happens in the sport of boxing too often, where guys, we don't see the fights that we want. And when we do see it, guys are past their prime, or guys are not at their elite level, or in their prime. So it's just, we see it too often in the sport. We have an opportunity to see this guy, Terence Crawford, and hopefully Errol Spence is, and if Errol Spence is not undefeated, if he loses, there's other guys that PBC have at 147. So there's still Sean Porter, there's still Keith Thurman, there's still Danny Garcia, there's still guys out there. So it makes perfect sense. And even 154, the 154 division, 154 pounds, that division is on fire. On fire. Charlo, Hurd, Tony Harrison. Jason Rosario. I know Charlo stopped Jason Rosario, but Jason Rosario is a live guy against anybody at 154. So if Crawford eventually wants to make that travel up to 154, well, if he's with PBC, he's got fights there too. So for Terence Crawford, it's weird. Guys that are between 147 and 154 should be with PBC. Guys who are maybe 135, 130 should be with Top Rank, right? And that's the tough part about boxing. It's just all these different promotional things going on that get in the way of big-time fights. Let's get this promotional stuff out the way, and let's get some big-time fights. Let's see Terence Crawford, Errol Spence. Let's see big-time fights. And you talk about Devin Haney. Yes, Devin Haney has a lot of ability, has a lot of talent. Devin Haney is solid. And that 135 division is on fire. 135 pounds, between 135 and 130. Tank Davis, he can go 130, 135. Haney, he could be at 135. Teofimo Lopez at 135. So he can go up and down. You got Shakur Stevenson, he's coming up there. He's at 130 at this point. So Devin Haney, you got Ryan Garcia, and Ryan Garcia, who knows how great he is, and we'll see. Eventually he'll fight Luke Campbell. I know Luke Campbell got COVID-19, but we'll see. I know they're looking to reschedule that fight at some point. But you got Haney, right? You got Teofimo Lopez. You got Gervonta Tank Davis. You got guys who could be stars. Teofimo Lopez has star written all over him. That was a star-making performance against Lomachenko. Gervonta Tank Davis, the guy put seats in, put some fans in the seats. We saw what he did in Baltimore. We saw what he did in Atlanta. And the guy, he's exciting. We saw what he did to Leo Santa Cruz. He's exciting. The dude knocks people out. That's what he does. He knocks people out. So I look at Tank Davis, a guy, yes, it's exciting. Devin Haney, exciting. Teofimo Lopez, exciting. So there's a lot of things that could be made there. Obviously, you've got the promotional issues going on there in terms of Top Rank, in terms of Haney, who fights on DAZN, in terms of Gervonta Tank Davis, who fights on PPC. So we have to work all those things out for all those things to happen. But I hope it does happen. Man, I hope it does happen. But, it's boxing, and things get in the way of boxing, in the sport of boxing. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button here on YouTube, on Facebook. Hit the like button. Just hit it up. And we'll be back here next Friday talking sports and having fun doing it. Thank everybody for listening. And so we'll do it again next week. So make sure you come on back next week. So see you later. Take care. Bye.